Oh, thank you so much for having me today. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't stay for the rest of the day. I would love to have had the opportunity to speak to more of you and to hear about your projects, but it's not exactly quiet in the political world at the moment, so I have to head back to Parliament immediately after. But really, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here today for the Climate Challenge Fund gathering, because it really is fantastic to see so many of the committed community groups here, and just to see the sheer range of projects that are represented. Now, the Scottish Government has really long since recognised the hugely important role that communities directly can play in tackling climate change. And as you all know, that this year marks the 10th anniversary of the launch of the Climate Challenge Fund. And really today gives us an opportunity to celebrate what the Climate Challenge Fund has achieved over that time, as well as to reflect on the progress that Scotland as a whole has made in tackling climate change. Throughout the last decade, the effects of climate change really have been felt right across the world, and it's no longer solely an issue for generations to come, but something that is happening right now, with people right across the country already being affected. Now, 2016 was the hottest year ever recorded globally, and this past summer was declared one of the joint hottest on record for the UK. So as we can see, the changing climate is directly impacting us here. The recent special report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change really reminded us of the urgency with which action is needed to really try and avert the worst impacts of global temperature rises. The report made it clear that action is needed at all levels, and that's not just from governments, but I mean from businesses, from communities and from individuals. And that's why the Climate Challenge Fund is such an important programme for Scotland. Now, I don't want to dampen everybody's spirits. I think we're all aware of what the challenges are. And that's why I think it's important that we don't lose sight of where we've come and what we've already achieved over the last decade. Because in Scotland, we've already reduced our emissions by over half since 1990, and Scotland continues to be a world leader when it comes to tackling climate change. Our renewable energy targets are some of the most ambitious in the world, and we have committed to phasing out the need for fossil fuel vehicles 8 years ahead of the rest of the UK. Now, the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform, Rosanna Cunningham, recently attended the UN Climate Change Conference in Poland to really showcase our world-leading climate policies and to help drive forward global action. And I think that we should all really be extremely proud of Scotland's progress and be spurred on to take greater and to take bolder action. On that note, we currently have the Climate Change Bill, which is working its way through Parliament, and we will complete that process in 2019, which will be the 10th anniversary of the Climate Change Scotland Act. Now, that bill increases our emissions reduction ambitions in direct response to the Paris Agreement. Based on expert advice from the UK Committee on Climate Change, the bill proposes a 90% emissions reduction target of all greenhouse gases by 2050. And that also means that by 2050, Scotland will be carbon neutral. We've also asked the UK Committee on Climate Change if higher targets would be feasible, and if they advise that they are, then that is advice that we will act on. The bill also requires that the Scottish Government to regularly review the feasibility of setting a net zero target that encompasses all greenhouse gas emissions. Scotland's approach is already world leading. We're the only country in the world to set and report on annual targets, and these targets have to be met by domestic effort alone. And the bill will maintain both of these features. And I think that the bill sends a clear message that action is needed across every aspect of Scottish society by increasing long-term ambitions, as well as introducing the most ambitious statutory targets for 2020, 2030 and 2040 in the world. Our third climate change plan was published in February this year, and that represents a stretching and credible pathway to delivering further reductions to 2032. And the UK Committee on Climate Change called it an ambitious statement of intent. A key feature of this plan is the annual monitoring framework, which was published in October this year, and that tracks progress made on the policies and proposals in that plan. The Scottish Government has joined the call for global action at all levels by putting in place a range of policies and programmes that give clear signals to businesses, communities and individuals on the need for action. The transition to a carbon-neutral Scotland will fundamentally reshape our economy and society over the coming decades. There will be many opportunities, but of course there are always going to be challenges, and that's why we have to work together to make sure that nobody is left behind in that. And that's why the Scottish Government is establishing a Just Transition Commission to provide expert advice on adjusting to a low-carbon economy and doing that in a fair way. Now, within that wider picture of international and domestic action, I think that's where your efforts at community level are absolutely crucial, and that's exactly what the Climate Challenge Fund aims to support. Since 2008, the Climate Challenge Fund has awarded more than 1,000 grants worth over £100 million to 658 communities. Each of these communities has made a difference, and all of you have made a difference, because you're developing innovative solutions to tackling climate change at local level. While transitioning to a low-carbon Scotland will require new infrastructures and new technologies, how we as individuals, households and communities change our behaviours and engage with those new technologies is going to be key to achieving the transformational change that we need to see in Scotland. And there are many different approaches. There's long-running projects such as the Fourth Environment Link and Greener Kirkcaldy. They've built on their first Climate Challenge Fund grant to branch out and support food waste reduction, reuse and repair, and a lot more. Others, like Bike for Good, who focus their efforts on transport and travel, have specialised in one area. And I'd also like to commend those organisations who are working together with hard-to-reach communities to try and tackle climate change. Groups like Braga and Arnold Community Trust in the Outer Hebrides, who work with people living in some of the most remote places in Scotland. There's Lambhill Stables in Glasgow and New Start in Inverness, and they're engaging with urban communities in areas of multiple deprivation. Climate Challenge Fund groups also try and reach out to ethnic minorities who may face language and cultural barriers. For example, Aniso and the Esters Company empower their local African communities in Glasgow to improve their home energy efficiency and more. As well as carbon savings, there are many other benefits for communities involved in Climate Challenge Fund projects, including behaviour change, education, improved social cohesion, which make our towns and villages safer, friendlier places to live. And I'm sure that this is all something that you'll be aware of and that you will have seen. Now, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, and as many of you will know, 2018 is Scotland's Year of Young People. And I think I would like to keep, young people, I think you can extend that maybe up to 35, I think that's reasonable. That keeps me safe for the next couple of years anyway. But young people today definitely face a completely different set of challenges compared to previous generations. And climate change, without a doubt, may well be the greatest challenge that they will face. Now, climate justice is based on the core principle that the poor and vulnerable at home and overseas are the first to be affected by climate change, and they'll suffer the worst, yet they've done little or nothing to actually cause the problems. And climate justice also includes what's called intergenerational justice. So the idea that young people and generations to come who haven't contributed to climate change, they have the right to a healthy, livable planet. The Scottish Government is committed to championing climate justice through our world-renowned Climate Justice Fund. Earlier this year, the First Minister announced £50,000 of funding to support a partnership between the 2050 Climate Group and the Malawi-Scotland Partnership to help develop the Malawian climate leaders of the future. And this project will support both climate and intergenerational justice aims. The Climate Challenge Fund supports a number of projects which are engaging directly with Scotland's young people, helping to improve awareness and understanding of the urgency of climate action and helping young people to develop those invaluable skills. And I would even say from a personal perspective, this is something that I am certainly passionately about. Now, as already has been mentioned, I believe that last night too was the second annual Climate Challenge Fund Awards ceremony, and I would just like to extend my congratulations to all of the award winners, as well as to all of those who were nominated for awards. And just before I close, I'd really like to take this opportunity to recognise the efforts of a number of people who have contributed to making the Climate Challenge Fund what it is today. I wish firstly to acknowledge the huge efforts of the members of the Independent Climate Challenge Fund's grants panel, who have to make the very tough decisions on which projects to recommend for funding, and a special recognition goes to Elizabeth for her role in chairing that panel and for chairing today's event too. I would also like to recognise all of the Climate Challenge Fund projects here today, because that's what today is about. It's about celebrating all the achievements that you've made, and I know you'll join me in congratulating everyone here on their hard work and their dedication. Now, I suppose just the final words, I mean, I would really just hope to encourage you to keep up the good work, keep innovating, keep educating, and keep making Scotland a healthier, greener and happier place to live. And I'm just sorry that I can't stay for longer to speak to you directly and hear more about your projects, but I really look forward to seeing what other future projects come forward as part of this fund. And I would also appeal to you that if you would like me to come along and visit your projects, I'd be more than happy to do that. So please contact me, invite me along, because I'd love to come out to your communities and see the impact and the difference that you've been able to make there. And with that, thank you so much for having me today, and I hope you all enjoy the event today. Thank you very much.